Opening the center immediately claims space and prepares to develop pieces aggressively. Instantly challenging white's central ambition, this knight hops into a flexible position, ready to strike at e4 or d5 depending on how the game unfolds. Instantly claiming central dominion, white establishes a formidable pawn chain, aiming to stifle black's development and restrict knight mobility. Embracing the king's Indian setup, black signals a fierce fight for central influence and a potentially dangerous queenside counterplay. Developing a knight to its most natural square, this piece now eyes central squares and prepares for kingside castling. Fianchettoing the bishop here establishes a strong diagonal presence, a hallmark of the king's Indian setup. Forging a central pawn duo aims to seize space and hinder black's fianchettoed bishop's long-term influence. Solidifying central control, d6 prepares to develop the bishop and challenges white's pawn phalanx. Pioneering a fianchetto for the kingside bishop, this move prepares a robust pawn chain and potential kingside pressure. Securing the monarch is paramount here, as this king's Indian setup often involves sharp attacks where a tucked-away king can be a true asset. Developing the bishop to this diagonal offers superb long-range control and supports the central pawn structure beautifully. Initiating knight development towards the center, preparing for potential e5 or supporting a central pawn push while keeping options open for future plans. Developing the knight here prepares for a pawn storm on the kingside, potentially opening lines towards black's castled king. Unlocking the queenside pawn structure immediately challenges white's central grip and opens attacking possibilities. Fortifying the king's sanctuary while preparing to contest the central d-file is a sensible step. Unlocking the queenside is paramount. This exchange opens lines for your pieces to develop actively. Reclaiming the central pawn establishes a strong knight outpost, surveying the board and preparing for further offensive maneuvers. A knight repositions dynamically, eyeing the central squares and aiming to disrupt white's pawn structure by targeting d4. Solidifying the queenside and preparing to develop the light-squared bishop to a more active diagonal. Developing the bishop to this square subtly prepares for potential c8 pressure along the now open c-file. Sharpening the bishop's influence on the long diagonal, preparing to contest the d-file and potentially spring a queenside pawn break. This knight finds a dynamic outpost, challenging white's central control and eyeing potential breakthroughs. Knight infiltrates a vital central outpost, threatening to disrupt black's queenside structure. Simplifying the central structure, black aims to liquidate tension and potentially activate pieces. Unleashing the d-pawn establishes a commanding central pawn chain, challenging black's piece development and opening a diagonal for white's queen. Exchanging the knight opens a path for your queen and aims to simplify into a more active middle game structure. Opening lines strategically, white aims to exploit black's slight pawn structure weakness on the queenside. Seizing queenside space, this pawn advance probes for weaknesses and aims to disrupt white's coordination. Exchanging the bishop here voluntarily relinquishes control of the dark squares, potentially weakening your king's sanctuary. Recapturing the bishop opens lines, but consolidating your king's safety becomes paramount now. Unleashing a forcing queen check immediately disrupts black's coordinated pieces and aims to gain tempo for white's development. The king awkwardly shuffles, ceding crucial breathing room and exposing itself to potential future checks along the open diagonal, a clear positional concession. Liberating the c-file opens a path for your rook, while the king now faces diminished defensive capabilities. Reclaiming the pawn with the bishop immediately activates it, eyeing the king's side and bolstering piece coordination in the center. Fortifying the e-file immediately allows white to redeploy the rook, potentially creating threats against the black king. Developing the queen to d7 prepares for potential pawn pushes on the queenside and supports the central structure. Securing the e-file gains valuable central control and readies the rook for potential endgame operations. Unleashing the kingside pawn storm, a daring attempt to destabilize White's central control and open lines for active piece play. Probing the queenside, this flank expansion tests Black's pawn structure and threatens to disrupt their coordination. Liberating the bishop from passive placement now allows it to exert influence on the queenside, aiming to disrupt White's pawn structure. Repositioning the rook to the central file aims to activate it and create pressure on Black's pawn chain. Preparing to activate the rook on the f-file, this aims to create a powerful attacking battery with the queen, potentially threatening the white king. Expanding on the queenside, this move aims to seize territory and potentially disrupt Black's pawn structure. Reinforcing the fianchettoed bishop's diagonal offers improved central control and prepares a potential kingside pawn storm. Pushing the b-pawn expands queenside influence and prepares to challenge the opponent's compact setup. Challenging White's pawn majority on the queenside, this move seeks counterplay while acknowledging the pawn's vulnerability. Seizing crucial central space, this advance aims to disrupt Black's queenside structure and limit the scope of their pieces. This move finally activates Black's rook to contest the open file, a crucial step after such a prolonged build-up. Securing the queenside advance, this push aims to cramp Black's position and gain queenside space advantage. Reinforcing the queenside pawns now, Black aims to create counterplay and challenge White's expansive pawn structure. Unlocking the c-file initiates an aggressive central play, potentially targeting the weakened kingside pawns. Embracing the open file creates a critical tactical confrontation for the king's safety. Reclaiming the central file with the queen instantly sharpens the tactical landscape. A strategic redeployment, the rook aims to infiltrate the queenside pawn structure and potentially support a future pawn advance. Opening the queen's diagonal, White now eyes weakened squares around the Black monarch. Activating the rook along the open file bolsters its influence and prepares for potential breakthroughs. Asserting control over the open c-file aims to activate the rook and pressure Black's queenside. Reasserting pressure on the semi-open c-file, this maneuver aims to disrupt White's consolidated position and create counterplay. Simplifying the position with the exchange, opening the way to exploit the open c-file. Opening the c-file now offers White a clear path to activate their rook, potentially pressuring Black's central pawns in the upcoming endgame. Unleashing a decisive check, this maneuver pierces Black's defenses, aiming to exploit the exposed monarch and force a favorable endgame. Accepting the queen trade definitively transitions into a king and pawn endgame, where Black must carefully navigate the exposed monarch. Unlocking the d-file with the pawn's advance promises significant central influence in the ensuing pawn endgame. The king ventures out, a bold decision in this endgame, seeking active participation rather than passive defense. This pawn's march creates an unstoppable force, strangling Black's space. A forced capture that resolves material tension, initiating the pawn endgame's distinct challenges. Liberating the bishop to occupy the 7th rank creates an unassailable fortress against Black's remaining pieces. Activating the monarch into the fray now secures vital central influence and eyes potential pawn promotion threats. Securing the passed pawn, White initiates a strategic race to promote, aiming to overwhelm Black's exposed monarch. Accepting the pawn trade now seals White's queen-rook pawn's fate, bringing Black's king into a more active endgame position. Forcing the Black king to a less secure outpost, opening avenues for further piece penetration.